Everybody have Presta valves? Anybody have Schrader valves? Not know what a Presta valve is?
Yeah, what's the difference?
What's the difference? A car. Have you ever seen, like, have you ever looked at the valves on your car? The big rubber valve. That's a Schrader valve.
Because of the threads? Because of the threads?
No, it's just the two different names that they had come up with. The Presta valve allows you to have a smaller hole in the rim, and makes the rim a little bit stronger. Plus, on a Schrader valve, the air is held tight. It's held shut by a spring. On a Presta valve, this is held shut by air pressure. So therefore, you leak less air on the Presta valve.
Because the only thing with mine is I have two different stems on mine. One is short and one is long.
That makes no difference. You know, they're arrow wheels, and you can see on this one, I've got the short one there and a long one there. You know, a lot of athletes have, you know, deeper V race wheels, you know, aerodynamic race wheels, and that's where this came from. Came out of my, you know, that other wheel set. On Presta valves, to air it up, a lot of times this little nut, and it's hard for you guys to see it. There's a little nut here. It'll be closed. You just want to loosen that up.
Did you say what you prefer, or does it matter?
Well, most road bikes, tri-bikes, anything like that, are going to have the Presta valves. They're not going to have the Schraders, just due to a lot of times you have a much narrower rim as well when you get to an aero rim, and that doesn't allow for the Schrader valve. Plus, they don't make long, you know, Schrader valves. The only one I've ever seen is on the Walmart's got a road bike, and it's, you know, it's about that long, and it's so hard because people bring them in, and, you know, we don't have that tube. You know, that's a tube that they sell. So most of your road bikes, all that, are all going to have Presta valves. Things are going more and more towards that way, anyways, just because of the way that it holds the air pressure. You know, it's a lot. It leaks less air. Tubes will leak air every day. You lose 5 pounds a day, just due to rubber being porous. You know, air is seeping through. So, you know, every time you ride, check your air pressure. If you've got a floor pump, if you've got a compressor, you know, even if you just got a air pressure gauge, just, you know, check them, make sure they're aired up. If the tubes go low, you run risk of a pinch flat. Say you're on a ride and you hit a pothole, that tube may slip underneath the tire, pop, you know, then you're replacing things out on the road when you could have just aired them up, you know, at home. So loosen that up, give it a tap, just to release that air pressure. And then this pump has a smart head on it, which allows it, the pump chooses which valve, so I don't have to mess with 2 different heads or flip, you know, any rubber pieces in and out. You just air it up.
Do you vary the pressure depending on conditions, like rainy, sunny?
Well, if it's rainy, you generally run a little bit less pressure, just because you have a bigger footprint, you know, and you won't. I mean, you're going to have to be careful regardless, racing or riding in the rain. But I generally run about 110 psi in my tires. On a rainy day, I put 95 in it. You know, this year, I don't know if anybody went out and watched Twilight this year and saw how it just the pouring rain. Well, when we were racing, I borrowed really slick. You know, I had racing at night at a pro race. I borrowed tires on that had a lot of tread on them. I ran those things at 80 psi. You know, just because, you know, that way I had a huge footprint. You know, and that way you could still take. I mean, at that point in time, I ended up crashing. It was pouring. Everybody saw how hard it was raining that night. You know, I think 140 of us started, and I think 32 finished. You know, there were a couple broken collarbones. It was crazy. So there's nothing. You just got to be careful. Run a little bit lower tire pressure. You'll be fine. Normal conditions, 110. Now you also don't want to run them at their max. You know, a lot of these tires will say 120, 130 psi on them. You got to remember that a lot of the rims are not meant for 130 psi. You run 130 psi, you run the risk of, you know, if you're braking a lot, you're also heating that up, and that might flare. Plus, if you run 130 psi, it's actually slower. You're rolling along the ground, let's say on a bumpy road, and instead of the tire like conforming over the rough spot, it's bouncing against it. So you're actually working against yourself. So if you run 110, 115, you're ended up being, you know, in a lot better shape.
Do you find that temperature fluctuations, let's say it's 100 degrees, just so happens
like it is now.
It's like this year, so happens like
Hypothetical, yeah, as opposed to, say, winter riding, do you tend to fluctuate based on the temperature?
I don't. I mean, we rode. I run. It depends on the conditions and where you're riding, more or less. This morning we rode in the mountains, and a lot of times if it's hot out like it is, and I know you're gonna be flying down those descents, I run a little bit lower tire pressure, just that way, because you're gonna be braking, and the heat combined with the braking surface, the heat that's coming from your brakes. If you run a little bit lower, you run less of a risk of blowing that tire. But blowing tires happens almost never, so it's not really something you need to worry about. But just keep that in mind. When it's hot outside, and if you're gonna be flying down on your brakes a lot, it's a little bit lower. But in general case, if you got a road bike, 110 psi, 115 psi.
So the cure to that is just don't use your brakes.
Yeah, exactly.
Just keep on going.
Just go. Yeah, just point it and go.
There's a lot of events where you have to bring your bike the night before and park it, and they say to let the air out of the tire. Is that,
No, don't do that.
or why?
Well, I don't know why. I've actually never heard of letting your air out of the tire. Of all the tries I've done, a lot of them have been rack your bike the night before. It's makes it easier for race directors, and a lot of the race directors have to go through and check your bikes in the morning. When we put on a half in Illinois where I lived, we had to go through it, all the 400 bikes, make sure they had end caps. Make sure that nothing was frayed, nothing was dangerous, and so that's why they do that rack your bike the night before. A lot of them, they'll have security, so you don't have to worry about your bike getting stolen. But I've never heard let the air out of tires, and frankly, you're going to have to probably pump them up in the morning, because being outside versus being in a climate-controlled house, they're going to lose. Once again, there's going to be a huge fluctuation in pressure and change just due to being outside. The humidity will take. So you bring your pump with you in the morning, race day, and just check the tires once again. Say you're out on a ride. A lot of people carry the seat packs that have a tube and CO2, or you carry a pump on the bike, tire levers, things like that, and you get a flat. Just like that. We'll do the rear because it's a lot harder and people get more confused. So you get your flat. On your road bike, once again, your brakes have a quick release on the front here. It's just a matter of flipping that lever up, and that widens the brake caliper so you can get that tire out of there a lot faster. You're not fighting with the tire, and it gives you more space. On the rear, what you want to do to make it easiest for yourself to get the wheel out is you want to shift it all the way into the lowest column. What that allows you to do is it gives the derailleur the most amount of flex to get out of the way. But it also, that way when you put it back on, you're not trying to sit there, well, I was in 4, was I in 5, and then you put it in 1, and you get back on the bike, and you go to pedal, and it skips, and you end up banging your knee into the stem, and not having a good day. You end up bleeding. So, quick release, down. Oh, I've experienced it many times. So you see how that just kind of fell out of there with that, it's a lot easier when you have somebody with you.
Yeah.
If not, you can flip the bike over. Flip the bike, put it on the handlebars, put it on the seat on the ground, and just yank it out.
Or have a stand nearby.
Yeah, have a stand nearby.
Just a stand.
Somebody's porch. You can use anything. A tree limb for a lot of times I've been out on the side of the road. There's a low. You get a low tree where you just hook the seat over the the tree limb, hang it from there, yank the